All right, well, let's jump into our costume analysis. We're jumping into the second of our Clark Kent costume analysis series, this time featuring George Reeves. There he is, George, as Clark Kent, going through bit by bit. Let's start with the glasses. And these are a lot more bolder than what we saw with Kirk Allen. A lot more of a thicker frame. Michael, your thoughts on the glasses?
Yeah, very 1950s. Thick plastic frames, as was the kind of the fashion of the time period. Plus, I think the thicker frames, even though disguising himself as Clark Kent really wasn't like the. I mean, there were the secret identity thing came up from time to time, but it always seemed like him being he didn't differentiate Clark
Mm,
and Superman all that much. But I think the thicker frames do disguise his face more.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I like I like the thicker frames more than I like the wire frames from Kirk
mm,
Allen.
agreed.
Um, it just gives you. I mean, at the time, I mean, every generation has their different type of glasses and their different type of eyewear and all of that. This is right out of the 50s. It's still golden age, and it really fits the character.
Agreed. I think they're nice and bold and just add to the character when they are a thicker frame. So there. Then we go with the hat, and I love, as I said last week for the Kirk Allen, I love the fedora hat for the Clark Kent look. And George always kind of had it sitting back a little bit on his head, didn't have it down around his eyes or down over his forehead. It was always like sitting back a little bit. Just had that, kind of gave it an extra bit of character to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fedora, again, in addition to being fashion of the time, just kind of differentiates. Like you could do a silhouette of this Clark Kent and know that it
Mm.
was Clark Kent, as long as you kind of got the glasses and the hat in there. You could kind of glum onto the fact that that's Clark. So yeah, I love the hat.
Well, the hat, as we said, it's just classic. I mean, yes, it's what men wore at the time, but we are so when we think of Clark Kent, for the most part, this is how we see him with the hat and with the glasses and the suit, and it just that the hat is just it makes the whole look.
I
At least
agree.
of the earlier version of Clark Kent, in the 40s and the 50s, it's the entire look of Clark Kent.
Agreed. I couldn't say it better. And then you get the suit, and here again we've got the fashion of the times, the double-breasted suit. Again with that kind of baggy look, the pants. It's the style of the time. They're not tight-legged. They're
Yeah,
very baggy legged, and very form. No, it's not form-fitting at all. It's got that whole straight look to it. The shoulders are very padded. It's classic 1950s attire.
yeah. I really don't have much to add to that. It's just how suits looked. I think the fact that they are baggy does kind of hide his physique a little.
Hmm.
I was always kind of fascinated that they went with like the shoulder pads both in the Superman suit and in the Clark Kent thing with him. Um, but no, I just again, you see these images of him, and it just looks classic, like gray suit, black tie, white shirt, fedora. It's kind of the whole package, and it kind of becomes an iconic look.
I will say I think it looks better, fits a little better than Kirk Allen.
Mm.
Of course, I'm very used to this look, being a big fan of the show.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say except it's just from top to bottom, that suit is it's iconic, and it's Clark Kent, and you don't really need to say much more.
And obviously he wore the same suit pretty much every episode because that way they could interchange what they needed as far as what footage they wanted for him going into that storeroom to change or what have you. So it was always, and shot things out of sequence. So it was always, they didn't have to worry too much about wardrobe, being something they needed to keep track of, because it was always the same suit. So that was always an interesting factor. And then you've got the hair. Clark Kent very much wore the slick back hair. So did Superman in this series. There was real no differentiation between Clark Kent's hair and Superman's hair. If it wasn't for the hat, which he wore most of the time, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, I always thought it was kind of interesting that Dean Cain's Superman had the slicked back hair, whereas this Clark has both for his version of Superman, probably because it's just easier. They don't have to do too much difference in the makeup and all that. It's like I'm sure with the new Superman having such a different David Cornsweet having such a different hairstyle from Clark to Superman, that there's probably more to do in the makeup chair, where these people just wanted to save money as much as possible. So just give them slick back hair, get them out there and get them filming.
This show, in particular, yes, money and all that was a factor. I don't think they cared as much as far as as you talk about Clark and Superman. There's really no big difference between the two in the series. So the fact that he has the slick back hair as Clark, and he has a slick back hair as Superman. The whole idea is when he changes into Superman, he's Superman. When he's Clark, he's Clark. The hair. No one's thinking of the hair. They're thinking of the S. They're thinking of the physique when he's Superman, and so the hair is not, especially in this series, the hair is not that big an issue.
No, exactly. So there you have it. George Reeves himself. We've spoken about his persona, his look, and everything. He had that the chin, and he had the good looks, and he was the people's Superman. He was definitely a lovable father kind of figure, not just to the characters within the show, but to the audience that was watching at the time. And his Clark Kent was someone that you looked up to as much as you looked up to his Superman. He was pretty out there as far as being go-getter. As Clark Kent, he was just as forthright as he was when he was Superman. So there wasn't too much of a differentiation between the way George played Clark and Superman. But he just seemed to be having a good time, even though there's stories about him hating the Superman suit and calling it the monkey suit and what have you. He just seemed to enjoy being around the other cast members at the time, and he was just a lovable version of both Clark Kent and Superman.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing to really add for that, oddly enough.
No.
I just think, everything Steve said, I'll just agree with.
Wow.
Same here, but this is my, until Christopher Reeve came along, this was my Superman.
Yep. So there you have it. That's our costume analysis of the Clark Kent as seen in My Adventures with Superman, the 1950s TV series. Thank you, gentlemen, for doing that. We will move on next week to the Clark Kent. We've done Bob Holliday, his Superman, so we probably should touch on his Clark Kent, even though we don't have a lot of footage or a lot of imagery of Bob Holliday, but he was the next Superman in line in the 1960s, 1966 Broadway musical It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, so we'll get onto that one next week. So that was the costume analysis for this week.